Hello again. This coming Sunday is not a liturgical observance of the Independence Day of our country, and yet it would be hard for us not to at least give some thought to this event that is so important to all of us. I certainly appreciate the country I live in, the efforts, the energy, the sacrifices that have been made throughout the 244 years since that great day of July 4th, 1776, when our founding fathers proclaimed that they would be independent of King George and would establish their own country. It's a very important date. And yet, as I've reflected over the years, that search for independence from you might say, the political oppression of the royal house is something that is part and parcel of a continuing part of the story of the United States. Because we'd like to think independence was achieved. In some ways it was. We're an independent nation. But yet independence from so many things is still something that holds us back. I finished reading a very wonderful biography. It's the biography of Frederick Douglass. You may not have even heard of him. Frederick Douglass was a man born as a slave. The name of the book is Prophet of Freedom. He was a slave born way before the Civil War. He escaped his slave masters in Maryland, made his way to the north, and there he finally obtained freedom, not from the Emancipation Proclamation of Lincoln that didn't come for another 20, 30 years, but through the kind courtesy of a number of donors who paid off his slave owner and thereby granted him emancipation and freedom because they paid off to the slave master the money owed on his ownership. He always felt somewhat bad about that. He didn't want them to pay him off because he felt that it was wrong. It's wrong to hold somebody a slave and to make them the trading by money of something valuable. Frederick Douglass, in his decades of teaching, writing, preaching, he was a man who had no formal education, and yet he wrote a number of autobiographies. He was a gifted and talented preacher and teacher and orator. He was in demand throughout the United States, certainly in the North, certainly not in the South, because he was an abolitionist. He was for the ending of slavery. And even after the Civil War took place, and you might say the Emancipation Proclamation was proclaimed that America no longer would legally consider any kind of slavery of a human being, there were lots of issues that came up again and again, even after the Civil War. We forget there was like a progression here. The African American was granted no longer to be a slave, but that didn't mean anything. He wasn't necessarily a citizen either. No, that needed another, you might say, level of independence, with another amendment to the Constitution. Then it had to be even further amended that they had voting rights. You say to yourself, really? Yes. I mean, it was not something automatic that these men and women enslaved by Americans were thereby granted freedom, but yet that freedom hardly meant anything. And then even after all of that, as the 1870s and 1880s came upon us in this country long after the Civil War, there were lynch mobs, there was attempt to control and limit even the voting rights of the African Americans by poll taxes and other devious means that sometimes didn't even apply to the white folks, but it applied to the black folks. It's a real interesting story. Not because it's a negativity about our country, but it reminds us that independence is to become independent of a lot of things in life. Independence we want from a lot of things that hold us back all the things that hold us human beings back from really being what we should be as human beings. There's envy, jealousy, hate, prejudice. All of these things, in a sense, are even more oppressive than King George was over the human heart. Strange, isn't it? You know, in some ways, you might say it was easier to throw off the shackles and the royal privileges of a king of England than it is sometimes to take independence and to show off the shackles that so hold back the human heart. Have a wonderful 4th of July.